Hi, my name is Nora Navarro, and this is my Turning Points History Project. So let's start off with the war against the bank. The Second Bank of the United States had many controversies to it and only lasted 20 years due to Andrew Jackson, the U.S. president at the time. He believed the addition was unnecessary and removed it, which in the end only caused more damage. Andrew Jackson. He was the President of the United States during the rise of the common man. He brought new ideas to power, including a diverse group instead of just old white male politicians. He was also the main one who didn't want the second U.S. bank. He never had a trust for government institutions involving money and preferred hard coins over soft dollars. His actions against the bank, which included the removal of federal deposits and the veto of the bank recharter bill, led to the expiration of the bank. With no bank, people could not take out loans or access the money they had saved up. This led to more anger between Federalists and agrarians, as Jackson had favored one side in this decision. Here's a lithograph by David Claypool Johnson of Henry Clay sewing Andrew Jackson's mouth shut. This picture is supposed to depict Clay trying to silence Jackson over the debate of closing the U.S. bank. It also shows who should have more power, executive branch or legislative branch. This topic is still up for debate today, but back then the bank was more important. Jackson wanted the bank gone, but Clay didn't. Clay said that Jackson was abusing his presidential power for trying to remove the bank and treasurer from the U.S. Before the war against the bank, people didn't really use paper money much, more coins and trading. Once the U.S. bank came out with a more standard form of currency, it caused somewhat chaos among the people as they had to adjust to a new form of living. For Andrew Jackson, however, he did not want this new way of life. His whole campaign he promoted representing the common man and having ideas that would benefit more than the elite upper class. He wanted everyone to participate and have a voice, so when he became president, he put in rules that some might find illogical. First, he bought land that some found controversial. Then, he had struggles with enforcing rules in the South. In addition, he also brought the U.S. bank down as he thought it was evil. The Trail of Tears, which was a forced removal of natives, also caused by him. The one that really stands out here is the bank. Since his campaign was all about the common man, he felt the common man should not use paper currency but rather other forms such as coins and trading. He always had a mistrust in government business, so when he came to power, he wanted to take the bank down. This issue can still be seen today with current presidents and people in power. Many of them do not want the government to be in charge of all the money, and they want their freedom of money. In addition, many people do not put their money in banks from mistrust of them. Andrew Jackson had this issue, and people still do today. Next is prison and asylum reforms, which were a cry out to help the mentally ill in prisons where they were not being treated properly. In addition, the conditions of prisons were in general very poor and could have used some improvement. A courageous woman advocating for mental hospitals, Dorothea Dix brought light to many dark issues that U.S. prisons had at the time, including confined stalls, mistreatment of the insane, and the grouping of men, women, and children. She established 5 hospitals fit for the insane in the U.S. and fought for human rights in Europe as well. I proceed, gentlemen, briefly to call your attention to the present state of the insane persons confined within the Commonwealth, in cages, closets, cellars, stalls, and pens, chained, naked, beaten with rods, and lashed into obedience. This direct quote from Dorothea Dix explains how the mentally ill were being treated in standard prisons. As you can see by her account, the treatment was unjust and inhumane. This is why she was writing this in her letter to the legislator of Massachusetts. She wanted to ensure that these conditions be fixed and that the insane have their separate locations so they can receive the attention they need. Before the prison reforms, the conditions inside were poor and often the prisoners were treated degradingly. Men, women, children, sick, and the insane were all in the same prison, both in the U.S. and England. Dorothea Dix, Dr. John Galt, and Lewis Dwight all saw that something had to be done. Dorothea advocated for the insane to England and opened 5 insane hospitals in the U.S. Dr. John Galt was the superintendent of the Eastern Lunatic Asylum and wanted to bring some of his ideas into the facility. His ideas included drugs, talk therapy, and outplacement. Lewis spread salvation and penitence to jails so prisoners could feel they had a sense of hope. All of these great people contributed to better care in jails, separate facilities instead of everyone mixed in, and proper hospitals for the mentally ill. After these reforms were made, everyone was treated better, and other countries started to look at the U.S. to change their imprisonment systems. Some countries are still working on it, and the U.S. could still use a few tweaks, but regardless, it is all an improvement. Prison and asylum reformation can be seen today, hopefully not from the inside, but rather the outside. We now have insane asylums thanks to Dorothea Dix, which you can see if you literally look outside the window. We also have better education within prisons and separate detention centers for women and juveniles. In addition, there is therapy within the facilities and a better care for the imprisoned. It is clear that the reforms have made a drastic impact on prisons, and we can still see the results today. Up next is the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which is an act made in 1854 that stated Kansas and Nebraska could be either a slave or free state depending on popular sovereignty, even though they were both above the 3630 Compromise line. Senator of Illinois and supporter of the Kansas-Nebraska Act, Stephen A. Douglas definitely has something to do with this turning point. His plan included making Nebraska a territory while making Kansas almost a slave state with all the Southern support. This meant that all the land in the territory would be open for slavery, which is what Douglas wanted, as he had hopes for a transcontinental railroad to pass through that land. This is the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which is what the final straw was before the Civil War. All the tension that the North and South had was pushed over the edge with this document. Stating that the land above the Compromise line could allow slavery outraged the North. This is why it eventually started the Civil War, as the North feared the Fugitive Slave Act might be broken as well. Before the Kansas-Nebraska Act, U.S. was relatively peaceful. Of course there was tension as they still had opposite views, but for the most part everyone was calm. Then Douglas came around and proposed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which stated the new territory remained territory and that the people would decide if they wanted slaves or not. It wasn't a big shocker that Southerners supported this idea, as they were closer and more people could go over and say they wanted slaves. This is what angered the North. The land that they were disputing was above the 3630 line, so there should have been no dispute whatsoever. It should have automatically been free. The North also began to worry that if they could look over the Compromise line, they might look over the Fugitive Slave Act. This increased tension, which is what eventually led to the Civil War. This turning point is a little harder to see as the U.S. no longer has slaves to be fighting over, but nonetheless it is still relevant. The dispute over which people stay where is seen today in the U.S. with illegal immigrants from Mexico. Donald Trump wants to build a wall that clearly separates Mexicans from Americans, just like Douglas did with the new territory. The only difference is that Douglas let the people decide and Trump isn't. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed my Turning Points presentation.